Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City of Columbia Design Development Review Commission meeting for August 11th, 2016. We welcome you and we call the meeting to order. The commission is made up of volunteers with expertise or interest in historic preservation and design. We generally meet on the second Thursday of the month, as today is, to review cases. The commission is supported by the city's urban planning and historic preservation staff who are here today. Please let them know if you have any questions, taking care not to impede the proceedings. The meeting generally proceeds with staff calling the case and describing it. The applicant may also come forward to add to the basic description of the request if necessary. If so, please try to keep your presentation to less than 10 minutes. The commissioners will then have the opportunity to ask questions. After this period, I will ask if there is anyone in the audience who wishes to speak for or against the proposal. Audience comments shall be kept to 2 minutes per person. If there is, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond, and this rebuttal shall be kept to 5 minutes. In most of the cases, we will make a decision tonight after all information has been presented. If your case is denied, or if you feel that our decision was made in error, you and anyone with standing have the opportunity to appeal it within 30 days of the decision. All decisions of this commission are based on existing guidelines and ordinances. If you plan to speak about a specific project, you must have signed in. The sheet for signing in is at the back of the room or at the podium. Please note that these meetings are streamed live. They are recorded and broadcast. So please use discretion with any personal information you choose to share in the course of the proceedings. And again, all motions and decisions are made while applying all of the facts to all of the guidelines. Will all persons who plan to speak at this proceeding stand and raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Thank you very much. Have a seat. Will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bachknight?
Here.
Ms. Great?
Here.
Mr. Gressett?
Here.
Mr. Herger?
Here.
Mr. Heiler?
Here.
Mr. Cohn? Here. Mr. Powell?
Here.
Mr. Wynn?
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you very much. Does the agenda still stand?
We've had one change since the agenda was advertised. Item number 5 under the historic preservation portion of the agenda, which is 1634 Main Street, which is a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill and design approval for exterior changes to an individual landmark, has been withdrawn. Otherwise, the agenda stands.
Thank you very much. In regards to the consent agenda, the Design Development Review Commission uses the consent agenda to approve any non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. Examples of such items include residential site improvements such as fences, minor exterior changes, or signage. If a member of the DDRC or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting, that item is removed from the consent agenda and considered during the meeting. The DDRC then approves the remaining consent agenda items. Would you read the consent agenda, please?
Certainly. Under the historic portion of the agenda, we have 1649 Main Street, which is a request for a certificate of design approval for exterior changes, as well as for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill. This is in the National Register District, City Center Design Development District. And we also have 1107 Shirley Street, which is a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill, as well as design approval for an addition in the Melrose Heights Oakland Architectural Conservation District.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone wishing to remove an item from the consent agenda? That being the case, that there is none, we'll ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda as it stands.
A motion that we accept the 2 items presented on the consent agenda.
Very good. Is there a second? We have a second. Any discussion? Will you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mr. Bachnight?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Herger?
Yes.
Mr. Heiler? Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. That now moves us to the regular agenda, and we'll have staff introduce the first case, please.
The first case on the regular agenda is 1401 Assembly Street. This is currently in the City Center Design Development District, and a request for certificate of design approval for new construction of a 15-story residential building. This proposal at the northwest corner of Assembly and Washington is for the development of a 15-story multifamily building with structured parking. The proposal includes moving the existing building 1 block to the west. The applicant came before this commission in May of 2016 with an informational presentation to gather feedback. They were back before the commission in July, at which point a subcommittee was set up to discuss and provide some direction for some of the outstanding issues. And the evaluation talks about some of those issues and follow-up from the subcommittee, and I believe Russ Capelin and Robert Neely of Clayco Realty Group are here to present the project.
Thank you, ma'am. Would the applicant or applicants like to come forward and present, please? And I guess I must ask if you guys have signed in?
Yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you again for seeing us today. When we came last month, we've had the opportunity since then to both participate in the work group as well as review comments from the meeting and from staff, and have worked to incorporate those those details and suggestions into the project, which we're going to show you in just a moment. And then we have additionally advanced our discussions on the relocation of the beauty salon at 1401 Assembly, and have committed to working towards getting that building relocated, including a financial commitment on our, from us to help facilitate that. And we look forward to kind of continue working with the parties on that, and anticipate that we'll be able to get there shortly. So with that, I'd like to have Rob come up and talk a little bit about the changes that we've made.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I will, this is our 3rd time, so I will.
Hold on 1 second. Can we have our presentations before us? They don't seem to be coming up on the screens. Okay, very good. Thank you. Yep, we got them now. Sorry. Okay. We'll have to manually scroll. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption. Proceed.
We're glad to be back. It was just a month ago, and I know we presented, and we approval comments from the commission, and so we took that information back, and then we were here, I think it was about 10 days ago during the working session, where, I'm sorry, we were, can I? Okay. I wish I knew that 3 months ago. So we were then fortunate enough to meet with members of the committee 10 days ago during the work session, and I think that was a great opportunity, we felt, afterwards, in understanding some of the were made in the July meeting. So without, I'll move forward through the preliminary slides, which show the siting, the library, the photos of Assembly and Washington Street. Here's the slide. The building footprint remains as it was last time, so we haven't changed either the mix, the square footages, or the program. What we have focused on is the expression of the building and how it addresses the street front. Just to go back, along Washington, as I mentioned last time, just to service a building of this scale, we have to bring in a significant amount of electric switchgear, transformers, and such, which need direct access to the street. So as we talked about last time, that's along Washington, and I just mention it now because I'll refer to it then in the elevations in just a few minutes. So I'll start here on this image. Based on the feedback over the last two meetings, there were some comments about how the lobby and the entry of the building really address the street in a scale appropriate to a 15-story building. So what we've done is at the very corner, we've extended the architectural expression, the glazing, so that it now sort of connects vertically level 1 with level 2. It's a curtain wall and it goes all the way up, and it's both public space for the residents, it's common space. So we've addressed that, and I can show you that in a little more detail, where we've extended the frame up and just tried to be more stately. I think that also created a better relationship with the library as well in terms of their street front, which works at a slightly larger, more commercial scale, if you will. This is another close-up view of it. Again, I know one of the comments has been encouraging retail at the street front. Given the public program and the program of the building, right now what we've done is we've allocated all the common spaces, which would include the lobby, lounge, a fitness center, so that they are at level 1, so they are along the street front, along Washington and Assembly. So this is a view sort of looking through the glass, just to sort of give a glimpse at the sort of the activity that would take place within the building. Sure. At that corner, the residential units would start on level 3. So on level 2, that's still, it's common public space.
You're right.
Excuse me, if I could just let you guys know, the slides are numbered, so if you guys are having trouble following along, maybe just mention what slide you're on, because I don't think they're synced.
Oh, they're not. Okay, I'm on slide 35.
Sorry, I meant to mention that.
I think, yeah.
Sorry about that, I didn't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm on 35. So at the corner on level 1, which is street level, and level 2, those are public common spaces for the residents, and on level 2, that's not residential behind the curtain wall.
So what is the method for screening the residential portion behind that curtain wall? I mean, are there going to be blinds or curtains, or is it going to be clear glazing? I'm just thinking, as you have 15 stories of curtain wall, there's got to be some way to shield the residents, but you don't want it to.
Sure. Right. We'll have a standard shade fixture, a Mecco shade, if you're familiar with what those are. So we'll have and it'll be consistent. So throughout the building, architecturally, it'll create a statement and it'll be uniform. I just moved on. I'm assuming this is slide 36. Just to show the full south elevation. And again, it's just showing more of the Washington Street where the fitness center is at street level. We've also incorporated sort of a transom level, some additional architectural features to just start to break down that scale, because although it's one tall interior space, the height of the exterior varies from 18 feet to almost 26 feet at the western edge. I mentioned the electrical, I'm on slide 38. Sorry, I don't see a number. 37. I mentioned the electrical needs of the building earlier in the plan, and last time we were showing that as just a louver. You'll see towards the left edge of the building that we're showing a metal screen that has a pattern to it. We're seeing that now as an opportunity where it doesn't just look industrial, but it's actually an opportunity where either through etching in the metal panel or doing perforations, we can sort of incorporate a theme, a story within that surface so that it'll enhance and bring more life to that elevation. And I just went to the next slide, which just shows it with a little more detail. I'm also showing some of the street lighting that was asked about, or I'm sorry, some of the building lighting. So we're showing sconces that are really wrapping around the building as well. You see that to the left of the garage entry as an example. This is a perspective of the north elevation. We also discussed in both the July meeting and in the working session about the scale of that building wall. And this has been, it's been a design challenge for us that we've really been working on for many months. Given the program of the building and the ordinances, it's finding the right balance because we wanted to maximize the windows, the daylight, and then also just break down, the elevation so there was as much glass as possible, just to make the building feel lighter from the exterior. Right now we're showing 40% glazing from level 2 and above. To achieve that, we need to keep the building 10 feet off the property line. It's for safety and fire and just separation between buildings. So we worked with sort of maintaining that, not exceeding it, because if we were to exceed that 10-foot line, suddenly our maximum glazing allowance would be 25%, which would have a very large impact on the exterior look of the building. So what we did was we pulled the middle bar, so to speak, back to the south, which allows us 12 inches of offset so that it actually recedes back. The two bars at the end are clad in brick, and then the bar in the middle is stucco with a darker color. So we're trying to work with the contrast between the brick and that to also further give visual depth to the north elevation. We did, and you can see that I'm on slide 42 now. It's a close-up which just shows that recess, how the building steps back in the middle bar. On slide 42. In addition, we explored a second option. It's the same materials. It's brick on the two ends, but then in the middle, and this is slide 43. I'll go to slide 44. It's a close-up, and we were showing two different colors of stucco within that middle bar. We were exploring that as an option to visually maybe give a little more perceived depth and a little more interest to the building. We're happy with both of them. We wouldn't be presenting them if we didn't feel that they were successful options. I guess if the board was to ask our opinion, I think we feel that option A, just with the single color in the middle, probably creates the greatest contrast between the two end pieces. But as I said, we're content with both of them if the commission feels strongly about option B. And then just going through the elevations, they simply document in straight fashion the design intent that I just presented in 3D. Materials. And then also through the last two meetings, there was some questions and a request to see additional sections through the building just to show some of the texture. So we tried to address that with these drawings. I'm showing I'm on slide 50 now. which the middle drawing shows the trellis that's on the amenity deck of level 2, and then it shows the fitness center down below that, and it's showing the projecting frame elements that start to break down the elevation so that it sort of conveys that there's a single level, but it's really more of a two-story expression. We're also showing how the light is incorporated into those framing elements, just in the silhouettes and through the notes. On slide 51, in the center, that's a section that goes through the building lobby. So you start to see those framing elements again, showing the curtain wall, and as the building goes up, how it recesses and has a single plane that creates a corner entry that appears to be architecturally more of a two-story space than a single-story space. And then brick details around the window, and stucco details around the window, just to show the relief that would take place as the building wraps. And those are the slides.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm on. Any questions from commission?
Rob, I wanted to just say that we appreciate your coming down to work with the subcommittee, and think that you've incorporated a lot of the good ideas that we discussed that day. So thank you for your added efforts on that. When it comes time to, I noticed that the staff is still a little concerned about the Washington Street elevation, the scale. You know, as I look at your rendering, as you walk down the street, it becomes a pretty healthy facade there. Some 24 feet tall, I think you said.
Almost 22 at the western edge.
West, okay, 22 feet, which is a pretty good statement, you know, I think, particularly when you look at the trees and the people walking by it. So I guess if we move in a positive direction, you would still feel good about working with staff to get any kind of details or input on that particular facade?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll echo what Mr. Gressett has just said in terms of your response to the subcommittee meeting. The Washington Street elevation certainly has much more of a human scale, I believe, and that is quite nice to see. I do notice, and I happen to myself drive along Washington Street earlier in the day. There are a number of electrical wires running, what is that, east to west. And in all of your renderings, there are none. Have you worked with or dealt with SCE&G to bury these lines?
Yes, we've been in conversation over the last few months, so we're putting together a strategy, and our intention is to eliminate any lines that aren't in use, but then to take the lines below grade. So
And thereby removing the poles as well, I would assume.
Correct.
Awesome, thank you. Any further questions?
Are there any details, or has staff been provided details as to the materials of the trellis?
You're asking if we have any
Yeah.
information? I mean, aside from it being steel, I don't have any additional.
Is that something that staff would provide input on
Sure.
if we were to
Your mic,
move forward with this design?
I guess it's perhaps we could, look at another layer of detail. I mean, it seems like we have a pretty good idea of, what it's gonna look like.
I would
That's
just,
certainly something you could ask for.
yeah, I just think that it would be important, because I think the trellis has been added to give that mass and scale, that's not something that's kind of skimped out on during the construction budget and planning phase, that it really is something that you pay attention to.
Yeah, actually, at the subcommittee meeting, the presentation, and I don't think you were there, the trellis had been removed as a change. And so what we did ask is for them to consider putting it back in, not having it, though, overhang over the sidewalk. So that was certainly a change that's pleasant to see in my respect. Any further questions from commissioners? Okay, I guess at this point I will ask, therefore, gentlemen, thank you for your presentation. Are there any persons here who are in opposition to this project? And if so, please come forward. Please come up. Yes. You've signed in and been sworn in, I assume.
I'm Robin Waits. I'm the Executive Director with Historic Columbia. As noted last month, Historic Columbia's interest in this project is the impact that the new construction will have on the historic building at 1401 Assembly Street. This building is one of a small number that remain as representatives of what was once Columbia's thriving Black business district. Its orientation on the corner lot served as a unique transition from Assembly to Washington Streets. In 1916, it housed the Regal Drug Store, owned and operated by Columbian Charles Johnson. By 1919, the law office for Nathaniel J. Frederick was on the second floor. Frederick was the principal of Howard School, the editor of the independent African-American newspaper, the Southern Indicator, and the first African-American lawyer admitted to the South Carolina State Bar. By the 1980s, it was a center for social and political gatherings when it was Stroy's barbershop. The building has an important story to tell, and it needs to be protected from demolition to do so. So while we would prefer that the building remain in its current location, we understand that without landmark designation, this is a request that DDRC is unwilling to consider. As a result, Historic Columbia has been engaged in a productive conversation with Clayco to stem outright demolition by relocating the building to a lot at the northwest corner of Park and Washington Streets. And while this does remove the building from its original location, it does retain the building within the context of that historic Black business district. So we request that the letter of commitment that is being executed between Richland Library, the Mayor's Office, and Clayco, showing that the interested parties are committed to the preservation solution, be included as criteria for the project's approval.
Thank you, Ms. Waits. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak in opposition? How about anyone here who would like to speak in support of this project? That being the case, is there any further discussion or any rebuttal at this point from the gentleman? No? That being the case, any further discussion by commissioners?
I have a question about what documentation has been provided relative to the moving of the building. That's been mentioned several times, but has anything been put before either staff or this board to that effect?
We don't really have purview over that, so that's something that's being discussed with the city administration and the developer. But the DDRC, because the building isn't protected, I mean, if it, when it comes time to relocate it, the site plan will be something that we'll probably look at as a staff level review.
But there's no documentation, there's nothing that's been provided to us
Not at
to
this
which
time.
we should or can respond.
No.
Thank you.
From a legal standpoint, can we make that a condition of the approval of the certificate?
If I may add, again, I'm going to echo what has just been said by staff. Any documentation that may have come forward, or the fact that there is no documentation currently, would not have come to us, or would yet not come to us in the future, because A, it's not a marked building, and therefore it is not within the purview. So any decision that is being made, I understand everybody's concern here. Any decision, any motion by this commission has to be within the ordinances and guidelines of both the current site plan, which was passed in the last meeting and approved, as well as now the building design currently. There should not be, unfortunately or fortunately, however one looks at it, any consideration of the current building and documentation in our decision. Does that answer your questions? Okay. Again, is there anyone else who has any further questions or concerns? Okay. Mr. Gressett? Okay. I was just going to ask, is there anyone willing to make a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that we grant a certificate of design approval for the new construction at 1401 through 1431 Assembly Street and 1011 through 1019 Washington Street, based on the recommendation of the staff to include the further study of the southern facade on the Washington Street, which would also include study of the trellis as a part of that. In addition, the indecision about the color palette on the northern facade, my motion would include that we have a one-color palette of materials.
Thank you, Mr. Gressett. We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a second by Ms. Great. Very good. Any further discussion? Would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mr. Bucknight? Yes. Ms. Great?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Herger?
Yes.
Mr. Hyler? Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, gentlemen. We have now the next case. It is 1222-1224 Taylor Street. Would you present that, please?
Yes, this is case number 2 under the urban design agenda. This is a property in the City Center Design Development District. The request is for a certificate of design approval for renovations to an existing structure. And I believe Justin Lucas from the Boudreaux Group is here to present the project.
I'm sorry, we couldn't hear that last portion.
I think Justin Lucas is here from the Boudreaux Group to present the project.
Very good, thank you. Hello, folks. I don't believe you are here to swear in with others. Would you stand and raise your right hand if you plan to testify here? Do you plan, or are you, let me go back to my notes here, do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Thank you very much. Step forward, if you will. Have you signed in, sir? Okay, very good.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is 1222, 1224 Taylor Street, and as you can see in this image, you can see where the...
Just one second, if you might. You can lift that microphone and hold it up to yourself to be heard better. Thank you.
You can see above, on the upper, above the storefront of the facade where the used to be metal panel that was pulled down. And this is the plan where you can see the unhatched area is 1222 and 1224 Taylor. And it's the skinnier plan is the, used to be the Rose Talbert building, and the little bit wider one, 1224, was the Western Auto building originally. And these are the proposed facades where it's mainly restoration work with some limited recovery work to the storefront of the Rose Talbert building. And this is the east side of the Western Auto building where there'll be less work done. It'll be mostly as is with some limited treatment to it. Be some removal of the existing garage doors to the south, and where we'll replace with a new storefront. And this is how the buildings looked in the 1970s. You can see the original Western Auto sign, the original Rose Talbert sign. Those Rose Talbert letters are missing now, and it's just a ghost. And the Curly Q Western Auto sign is now missing also. And this is a photo from the 1950s where you can see the old service station, which is now gone and is now the site for the South Carolina Community Bank. And this is what they look like today. And it's only recently looked like this since the metal's been taken down. And this is a proposal for what they could look like, or what we're proposing they look like. And that's all.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here who would like, or are there any questions by the commission regarding the project here?
Just a quick one. This is being done in conjunction with what is Powell Furniture. I don't know what the address is there.
That's correct. That's 1519 Sumter.
Okay.
Is the catty corner building on Sumter that's connected at the back.
While we don't have purview over interior matters, you're dependent on that adjacent building for egress. Is that correct?
Yes. Buildings dependent on the back of Western Auto for egress. And so we kind of flipped that just a little bit here recently, but that's correct. The buildings are tied together now and are one property.
Okay. So this being the one that provides that egress, you'll be handling the exits out of the back.
That's correct.
And so we are reviewing that at this stage rather than at a later date for the other property. Am I understanding that correctly? Will there be another DDRC proposal for that other building?
1519's already been reviewed and approved.
Sorry.
And there's
Apologize.
staff comments, and we're working with staff on that project. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Any other questions?
Yeah, on the Rose Talbert building, it looks like the front facade, you're returning to the original look with the little turn down on the right-hand side.
Yes, sir. That's the plan, to do a recovery that, based on photographic evidence, to get it to as close as we can to what it used to be, since that storefront you see now was sort of heavily, kind of very rough shot added at some point.
So what is that material going to be as you match the second floor and turn it down to the first floor?
It is. We're going to do a continuation of the stucco facade to that small picture box to the west, and the recessed storefront portion to the left with the transom window, and then what we believe is Carrera glass at the base.
Thank you.
One question I have, and it doesn't show on any of the elevations, are you adding any mechanicals to this project?
We do. We will be. There are currently mechanical units on the roof, and we're adding and replacing those units on the roof, and we're going to work with staff to make sure that those are out of the sight lines. They'll be low-profile package units.
Very good. Okay. Any further questions? Is there anyone here? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Anyone who would like to speak in opposition or support of this project? Okay. That being the case, any thoughts by commissioners? Any discussion that one would care to have? That being the case, would one like to present a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that this committee grant a certificate of design approval for exterior changes with all details deferred to staff.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, we'll call the roll, please, for a vote.
Mr. Bachnight? Yes. Ms. Grate?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Herger?
Yes.
Mr. Heiler? Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
We have, I'm sorry, we have a motion that passed.
We have an approval. Thank you very
gentlemen,
much.
Lady. Appreciate it.
I think our next case now is in historic at 2307 Wayne Street. Have you been sworn in, sir?
I have not.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Very good, and I'm going to assume that you've signed in as well?
I will.
Okay, thank you. Stacy, I believe is going to present the case first prior to your speaking.
Good afternoon. This is 2307 Wayne Street. This is part of a planned unit development. This is, I think, the fifth one that Mr. McManus has brought before you within this PUD area. Overall, this project largely complies with the buildings in the area and with the PUD documents. There are just a few items that staff is pointing out that seem inconsistent with the area. One of those would be, as you'll see here in the examples of other four-square houses, which is what is being proposed, the porches are typically the only first story and are always open, sometimes wrapping to the side. And also the window configurations you'll see here are typically located close to the facade on the side elevations. You also do not see the window pattern that is being proposed, which is a 4/1, a square pane over a solid pane of glass. But overall, there are some consistent characteristics. The setback here, as you can see on the site plan, will be along with the other buildings that have already been completed on this west side of Wayne Street. The walls, materials, the roof, the porch roof, and other things are largely consistent. So our recommendations, and I do apologize, I forgot to include in my recommendations an item that I'll mention at the end, but our recommendations are that we find the proposed new construction generally complies with the pertinent guidelines from Standards for Review of Projects in DP districts that were utilized for review of projects within the Elmwood Park Architectural Conservation District at the time of this PUD's creation. We recommend granting a certificate of design approval for the construction with the following conditions. One would be that the front porch will be the full width of the facade with no enclosure. You can see here on the right bay has a enclosure in here, and this would be staff's recommendation. Also, for a window to be added to the first floor on the right side, close to the facade. We do not have floor plans, so Mr. McManus may be testifying to a floor plan that would impact these recommendations. Also, that the second floor window on the right side, closest to the facade that's outlined here in red, shall be enlarged to a full-size window. I'm on slide 71. And the windows, of course, to be wood or aluminum clad with exterior muntins, all details deferred to staff. And then the item that I forgot to include here, if you would please include in your motion, if you agree, is that the window configuration would not be the 4/1 as proposed, but would be something more consistent with the neighborhood and could be worked out with staff. And slide 72 would be the left side elevation, which is largely in keeping. So really it's the porch and then the windows. Do you have any questions for me? Oh, and you also have in front of you a memo from a phone call received today from Mr. Gibson, the president of Elmwood Neighborhood Association, voicing his support for the project. My understanding is that his understanding was that it would include an open porch, but I'll let Mr. McManus speak about that project. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, please
Well, in regard to a few of them, the client and myself we're okay with complying with adding a full-size window to the upper window on the right elevation. There are some lot constraints and some other issues that could basically, the front of the house where there's nothing really, that is actually an office and a front area for the room. And if we were to, the house was actually done and developed so that it would fit with lot coverage with an attached garage. So we really don't have any room to move or change that, and that would also require completely
Hold it up.
reconfiguring the rest of the home. So basically, all we need to do, or we would need to do, would be to leave the front elevation as is, so that the porch doesn't encompass the entire front of the actual facade of the front elevation or the property. We could add the larger window. It's actually in a stairwell, so the upper window could be changed into a full-size window. And the lower window we could add to the front. It would have to move further forward, closer to if you were to take the first, the second story corner board and extend it down, it would go closer to that. So it wouldn't stack underneath the other window, but it would be far enough away to be in a completely separate compartment, I guess, so to speak. We can't change the floor plan around in order to do so. If we do and we make it any bigger, we're right there on the verge of the maximum lot coverage as it is. So basically, he couldn't build the home. It also would encompass, even if it could, some financial constraints that just would prohibit us from being able to move forward.
I would point out that other homes you built were larger than this. So what's the, if you could
The
explain
lot
a
sizes are different. They each get smaller and smaller as you go to the right, so you don't have as many square feet. If you go to the whole thing, you'll see. And you also have to take into account the fact of the garage, the covered porch, and the walkway there in between it.
So there is a garage
Yes.
that will be built?
It's an attached garage, as you can see in that side elevation.
Okay, yeah. Very good.
So the other thing I would like to mention are that the guidelines explicitly say that the rhythm and portions of the facade should be respected by the adjacent properties. It never says anything about they have to be imitated. That it's also a form that's not non-existent in the neighborhood. It's non-existent in regard to a prairie or four-square style home. However, there are multiple houses in the contributing area that do have that outcropping. One that was approved not too long ago, actually, 2 years, or well, I guess it may have been 4 years back now, on Park Street that follows pretty much the same exact front porch. It just has a different style. It has a front-facing gable that's a little more towards, really, I mean, you can look at it. I brought some copies, so. That you can see as far as there, so. They
This is
kinda-
not, this is passing out an image of a house that we have not reviewed. This is not a project that's come through DRC.
Yes, it did. It came through 5 years ago, 4 years ago. It was a new construction built on Park Street on the corner of Park and the other, but it has. The address is on there as well if you'd like to verify it.
2320 Park.
Yep.
Does that look familiar to you? Did you review that one? Okay, my apologies, it was reviewed.
And approved.
But it is not a four square, which is what is being proposed today.
But I also brought others that show the same front form. So, I mean, ultimately it's up to you what we have to do we have to do and do a front porch, then the house probably won't be built. That's pretty much the extent of it, because there's no way to expand it large enough for lot coverage, and then also for within the budget constraints of the customer. So
Okay, thank you, sir.
it's also in a PUD, so it's not in Elmwood Park, which means that and the guidelines have a little more ambiguity than within the other parts of the Architectural Conservation District. So we should have more than enough leeway in order to move it through.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions, I'm sorry, from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I think I would side with the staff on this one. I think that
I'm sorry, you would what now?
I would agree with the staff comments, side with their comments about the porch being the full width of the house. To me, this just is a little too inconsistent with what we've seen in other approved designs.
Does it have any purview whatsoever that the house directly to the left of this house that's being built now has a partial porch across the front elevation? Another house down the street doesn't. It's of a slightly different style.
It's
But-
a very different style, the house he's referring to. I'm sorry, I don't have a photograph, but that is also not a four-square. These are images of four squares in the neighborhood. The one he's referring to is more of a folk Victorian, and that did come through DDRC for review, and it is appropriate to the style, the porch that he's referring to.
Any further questions from commission?
I would like to propose a small scenario, if it could be considered, in order for it to possibly be more reminiscent of an older home that it was enclosed at some portion in time, which there are a few of those in the area as well. We could do aesthetics to where the front portion of the house, the front roll lock or portion came across and it made it look like it used to be a porch that was enclosed. There are some details we could do to make that more prevalent or whatever as well. It's just a small thing on the end I'd like to propose in order a little more ambiguity in being considered.
Okay, thank you for that, sir. Any other questions by commission? Staff would be willing to work with the applicant on that last suggestion?
That would have to be your recommendation, mine stands.
Very good, thank you.
If I may ask a question directly to that, has the DDRC reviewed any renovations that included that modification to a four-square?
In Elmwood Park, I don't think recently, but generally in our, again, this is a PUD, but in our other architectural conservation districts, anytime a porch is enclosed, we encourage transparency so that they largely have to use glass so that it would not have siding, for instance. Much siding, usually it has some framing and glass. They could be large casement windows, for instance, but that's typically how we have handled porch enclosures. However, those have also often been side porches, not front porches, and not half of a front porch, at least in my recollection.
Okay. Is there anyone here or Mr. Gressett, please?
Well, I was just going to point out again that Mr. John Gibson in his letter or his phone call to the staff said that he was supportive of the idea, but I think wherein the entire porch was open.
Is that in it? Because I actually spoke to him today, and
I'm just reading what I was presented.
could you read it out loud, please?
Sure.
I haven't been informed of it, so I haven't.
This was from Stacy. I received a phone call today from John Gibson, president of the Elmwood Park Neighborhood Association. He was supportive of a revised version of the 2307 Wayne Street project wherein the entire front porch was open, which is how the project was presented to him, if I understood correctly. He could not attend the meeting but wanted to lend his support to the project, and he requested that I pass this information along to you.
I actually have texts from him that are completely to the contrary to that, but
Well, I spoke spoke with him today, and I asked him, he said that he thought the project agreed with the neighborhood, and I said, except for the enclosed porch as a point, and he said that he understood Mr. McManus to say that the new owners wished to have a open porch all the way across, and that was his understanding of the project. If he misunderstood, then that's obviously what I'm saying to you is what I was told just about 2 hours ago.
Thank you, Ms. or Stacy. Ms. Ritchie. Let me just, as we move forward here, we'll go ahead and ask if there's anybody here who would like to speak in support of or opposition to the project. That being the case, let me just remind us of the fact that this is in the Elmwood Park Architectural Conservation District. So design approval is really based on that.
Sorry, as a point of correction, it is not actually in the district.
I was just going to continue to say that the pertinent guidelines are from the standards for review of projects in the DP districts. And these were reviewed, projects to be reviewed in the architectural district at the time of the PUD's creation, so that there is some difference here. The DP districts and the PUD as well. That does have some bearing on any decision that would be made here. Any other questions or
Stacy, could you give us just a brief overview of the PUD, just general geography and when it was created and
In your documentation, you should have, after the information from the drawings, it was created in 2006, and the idea was that this entire west side of Wayne Street, which was, I guess, vacant at the time, would become a 10-unit development of single-family homes. And planning developments are typically like a specialized zoning district, so that they don't necessarily have to abide by the underlying zoning because they've got their own zoning created. And so as part of that agreement, the neighborhood basically came to an understanding with the city that it would not just be under city zoning or PUD zoning, but they would actually pull in some of this design review so that these houses on Wayne Street would hopefully reflect the character that was just across the street on the east side of Wayne, although it's not entirely residential, so that it would be somewhat cohesive with the historic district that was nearby. And so a lot of the language in here that you'll see is asking about they talk about landscaping, parking, but also architectural character. They use the standards that we have. They actually just repeat them in here, talking about enhancing the attractiveness of the building and keeping in line with the architectural design, surface treatments, location of the buildings, size and placement, the rhythm of windows and doors should reflect that of the existing neighborhood. Construct new buildings so the relationship of width to height of windows and doors, rhythm of solids, which is walls, to voids, door and window openings, are visually compatible with historic buildings. So the idea is to use historic buildings here as a starting point for the design review, in my interpretation of the PUD.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe the operative word there would be starting point.
What was that?
I said, I believe the operative word there would be starting point. You know, it's directly across the street from a highly commercialized, there's a refrigeration service company directly across the street. There's an electrical supply house, warehouse with a cyclone fence there directly across the street from it. And it may be my own subjectiveness there, but all the other properties that we've built and are constructing there and in the area have come out very well, and everyone in the area and neighborhood's been incredibly happy with them, not just the homeowners themselves. If you look there, the two there on the far left, we built and constructed those. the one that you see directly adjacent to the left of the square. We built that property as well. We're building one directly next to it right now, and two across the street from the ones that are by themselves on the end. There's kind of the oddball gym there that's right there in front of Aiken, which is the tall house that you see with the third story part there. I mean, it's more reminiscent of a beach house with a lot of really odd details and things that are reminiscent of nothing in Elmwood Park. I'm not trying or even evoking to anything whatsoever of anything like that. The only thing we're really trying to do is produce a product in a house that aesthetically is pleasing to the neighborhood and the area and around it, bring up the value. We've alone brought up the value in the neighborhood by $15 a foot in the past 2 years. You know, we're doing some good things, so, and we really are trying. And this is another project that we're trying to do and get through. We have certain constraints to try to work with, and I mean, if you guys could work with us and take in any consideration of what we're there and trying to do, I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
May I ask one more question?
Yes,
of the
Mr.
applicant?
Gressett, please.
So the way I understand it, we seem to be at a little bit of an impasse or a disagreement. You said, and some of the staff recommendations are in the positive that they would support the idea, but you're saying that's a deal breaker, that you will not do a full porch.
We can't do a full porch.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
And no second story space above that, could you reallocate the square footage to either go a second story above that back porch or shrink the back porch?
As you know, anything can be done. There's a bedroom and a master bedroom and the portion of a master closet there and adjacent to that area. So there really is no walkway or no area to relocate that square footage to that space. The only other real thing is that, you know, there and on the first floor without having to come upstairs was a pretty important factor to the client. That way, if he had someone come, he works from home or there's some, they could come in the front door, come into the office, not have to enter and go through the rest of his home. And I am open to any other suggestions to being able to make that layout or core house site structure and layout work.
And we do want to point out the PUD. I don't know which zoning you check, but the PUD actually gives you 30%, and you're at 27.7% lot coverage right now.
That's not if you incorporate what they actually take into, which is the full roof covered structure, the garage and all. We're right there.
You have 2,300.
I don't know exactly what it is. That isn't the footprint. The footprint's larger than that because the house is. Let's see if I can tell you.
Well, regardless, I think Mr. Howler's comments stand about opportunities elsewhere on the footprint to expand. No, that's a
May I ask a question as well?
Please.
We're judging this as a Foursquare. We're making the assumption that we're building a brand new 2016 Foursquare. And I guess that's my challenge is interpreting a PUD that is intended to guide new construction, but we're trying to build a building form that's 100 years old and replicating it in exact proportion and size and everything else. This is not a Foursquare. I mean, if you have an office towards the front, the definition of a Foursquare goes out the window, does it not? And I guess the question is, why are we comparing it to a historical form that this does not meet?
This is a Foursquare. These are historic American Foursquares, and the interior layout has no bearing on the architectural design of the exterior when you're describing these in historic architectural terms. So Foursquare has to do with the exterior footprint of the house, the porches, the dormers that are present, the symmetry on the building, so I'm
And-
not sure I'm following your question about the office.
I think that's
But
exactly my
there's a-
point, is that this building does not match those buildings. This building has a porch on the left, it does not have a porch on the right, as designed, as it's drawn. It does not match what's photographed, and
The
so,
porch is extending across that enclosure. That roof that's over the porch does not stop. It is continuous across the facade, as though it were a porch roof all the way across, like a four-square. And the PUD document says that these buildings are to, like I mentioned before, look like the historic district nearby. So if you're replicating a historic building nearby, my interpretation is that you should be replicating the main features of that, which include open porches and other details here. If it's not a four-square, I'm not sure what else I would call it. The other ones he's constructed have been more Victorian and Craftsman, so, and he's been fairly true to those, and the DDRC has essentially made him stick to the qualities. These varied a little here, but qualities that were reflective of the neighborhood, so, which are built with open porches.
so just to ask the question stylistically, if he was to make that front office a two-story feature,
Right, which he did on the one next door, actually, which is more of a folk Victorian. The one that, I'm sorry, I don't have a picture of, but the one y'all approved previously has a two-story bay, essentially, where the porch stops. Maybe he has a photo, so it's,
so the definition of the four-square, where you see the commonality, and I say you, and I mean from a staff position, you see the commonality as the one-story roof line on the front of an otherwise flat facade is the four-square, and that if the details of this building changed to match some other architectural style, then there'd be nothing wrong with it.
I mean, these are accepted practical words that other architectural definition books use to describe a four-square, so I don't want to, it's not staff saying, these are four-squares. And if you'd like to propose a different architectural style similar to what he built next door with an enclosed section that goes two bays, that's something you've already approved and I think would be something you could look at very easily. But to manipulate a design that is a recognized style and decide to make a very obvious change to it that is, in my opinion, not in keeping with the PUD documents, I mean, that's staff's interpretation. Yours may be different.
My main
Mr.
question
Gressel.
would be the same thing I said before. Nowhere in the guidelines and nowhere in that is the verbiage look like or imitate or anything of that nature. It's to respect. The exact word is to respect. So there is nothing that comes and is directly governing of, okay, I have to build a four-square to a four-square exemplary fashion and standard. There's nothing in those guidelines. If you read through them and if you actually listen to what you were just said multiple times, you added in words there that were your opinion with the utmost respect, not the verbiage within the actual guidelines. The guidelines are there in order to dictate what happens.
Sir, I think you've made your point. Thank you. Mr. Gressett?
Yeah, I had one more question. On the slide number 69, I don't know what's up there. Yeah, that one. So what if, how would staff feel or how would the developer feel if you had 4 pilasters and 4 columns and the right-hand side, as we're looking at it, the office was something other than siding and double-hung windows, if that was more of a glass element, as though it was a porch at one time that had been enclosed, like we have seen. Is that would that be an acceptable direction or not?
You need to check with the applicant, I believe, before
Well,
I would comment.
the way I'm understanding the problem, he's a little flexible, but he needs an office at the front of the house. And you guys are more stylistically concerned, and I'm just wondering if that could be a compromise solution.
fine with me. The only thing would be.
I think we're having maybe trouble with, I'm having trouble with, you know, 2 columns and a solid element that are not in keeping. And maybe if we could get there by having what used to look like a porch, 4 columns with a more of a glass enclosure, that might make me happier.
There's something that could be made to work. I just don't know exactly the fine details of what would or would not be acceptable. I mean, if you look at some of the other older porches that have been enclosed in the neighborhood, they're reminiscent of a porch, and they have corner boards and things as well. I mean, we could incorporate something where it was a column there and on each side on the front, and then it looked like it was walled in with the tripart window in the middle, which would take out most of the siding. I mean, I have a picture of a one on Park Street that was where a portion of it had been enclosed, and I mean, it's very reminiscent of what's there, if you'd like to see that, if it gives you anything.
Well, I think staff would need to take a look at it prior to us going forward. Let me just entertain Mr. Gressett's thoughts here. Pull this together a little bit. Rather than using the word compromise, I think we're looking at a difference of interpretation, both between Mr. Gressett and his comments and those of Mr. Powell, as they may differ from the interpretation of guidelines by staff. What I think we really are wrestling with is not wanting to defer this back to staff, but to come together here with a commission interpretation that incorporates the guidelines as they're presented. And I mean, again, just keep in mind that there is the difference of this being a DP district with PUD additional to it. So I think you've heard the suggestions. I don't know if any commissioners have other thoughts here. Mr. Hyler or anyone?
To be clear, because you just made a comment that I didn't realize was the case, you indicated that this was part of our guidelines and the PUD was in addition to those guidelines. Is that the case? Because I believe in the PUD it says that the Design Preservation District would be applied in the future, not presently. So is this within design guides or is it within the PUD guidelines?
The PUD, the language in the PUD is what governs. These are the guidelines in the PUD, basically. So when this came into play, the neighborhood asked for guidelines for the PUD that would reflect the historic neighborhood. But because the neighborhood itself had no guidelines, they've been around for a long time but never got together enough to put in guidelines for this area. They asked for this language basically to govern new construction in the PUD.
Okay, so the PUD is what dictates
The PUD,
our ruling.
That's right.
It is not the guidelines we're familiar with.
right, the language in the PUD.
Very good. So we have no one here to offer any concerns or support or opposition. We've had very decent discussion, healthy discussion here. The interpretation of what the PUD and guidelines are by the commission are what will guide any motion and or decision. Do we have one at this time? Mr. Powell, I see you're deliberating. Are you thinking of putting forward a motion?
As you're asking a direct question of me, I'll respond with a direct answer. I'm not considering a motion right now because I'm conflicted on this. I don't believe that I know personally well enough the guidelines of the PUD to respond appropriately because many of these terminologies, many of these phrases are different from what we're familiar with. And so I'm trying to review the PUD independent from what we are familiar with. I understand that the applicant has reviewed these documents. I understand the staff has reviewed these documents. And for me personally, it's very difficult to extricate the PUD from my normal train of thought. And so many of my questions leading up to this point have been geared towards understanding this particular lot and this particular set of requirements, unlike the requirements that are typically placed upon us. So to answer your question, I'm not working on a motion at present. I'm trying to understand what is before us to rule on.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Mr. Gressett?
Well, I can't support the idea as it's growing, but the discussion was, would they consider something other?
Mhm.
And could I ask, may I ask you a question? Yeah, I mean, if we could take a little informal.
You need to speak in the microphone.
Okay. This is what I was thinking. On that side where the office is, if that could be more of a glass element.
I'm so sorry.
You'll need to speak.
Right,
Yes,
now
you
we
do.
need to ask Stacy.
It would be hard to do straight glass, but if it were able to have just a larger window with glass and then like a small panel at the bottom, kind of what's found in some of the bays and things like that, then that definitely, I mean, we could make that happen and keep everything, and then go with the other recommendations as well. I mean, we could put the other
Would
window.
you show that to Stacy and see if that's in a direction that they could support?
Well, I'm conflicted as well. Certainly, any porch enclosures we've done, I'm sorry, Wesley, I didn't quite catch everything. It's, are large expanses of glass to convey the feeling of openness. But what we're getting into here is we're just getting into some new.
Right. And I'm trying to help him out.
I understand. I do.
Yeah.
I think you need to indicate how this meets the PUD language.
And I don't know the PUD language, so.
Well, all of the language is in the packet, and if I need to direct, I don't think there's one specifically perhaps about porches, which may be the hang-up here. But certainly it talks about openings, roofs, wall articulation, facade proportion, and rhythm. But this would need to be something that you I'm not voting, so, this would need to be.
And I'm not the designer of records, so I'm just trying to.
So
Let me,
if I could make a comment here.
go ahead, Mr.
I
Hyland.
think that based on my interpretation of the PUD and of the guidelines, this design does not meet those guidelines. And if it did, we would have already had a motion. We're trying to redesign this building based on something that would then meet the guidelines. So I think that's a very difficult thing to do without the applicant's input. I would be inclined to make a motion to deny the certificate unless we can come up with something that would fall into those guidelines.
Thank you. I appreciate your thought here. I'm going to put on my chairman hat here for a second and take in everything that I'm hearing. The term conflicted has come from several positions here, both on the commission and from staff. And I think that the lack of clarity right now before us certainly might not allow for a clarity of motion that one that we as a commission could really feel supportive of, no matter what the outcome or decision. There is therefore, my judgment, the idea that we should postpone consideration of this, it's going to require a second, and that it come before us at the next month's meeting. However, the applicant, once you've taken it back to the owner and so on, my suggestion would be, and work out your thoughts or any changes, but allowing us as a commission to become more fully versed with the difference between PUD and DP district.
I would ask kindly,
As it,
take the guidelines as they're in the packet here. They're, read them over. They have certain, and ask yourself yes or no when you hit those. I myself personally, when I hit each of those points, my answer is yes. If yours were to be different, however, if you just read the verbiage there and you go by the verbiage and the ambiguity allowed within the words on black and white in paper and answer yes or no to those, it kind of gives you, in my opinion, an objective way to answer yes or no without saying, okay, we're used to doing it this way or the other. It's literally a 3-page set of guidelines. So if you could, I would greatly appreciate that.
I fully appreciate that, and your, I won't call it instruction, your encouragement to us to do so is exactly what I'm suggesting. Keep in mind that we're a quasi-judicial board or commission. Everything we motion and decide upon has to come from a defensible position. If we just sit here right now as a commission and individually read 6 pages of what, and then therefore offer our interpretation, we would be remiss in our responsibility. So my suggestion to this commission, if anyone's willing to second this motion, is that we postpone consideration of this, on this item, until each of us has had a fuller understanding of the difference or the importance of the PUD to this particular project, and that it come back to us at the next meeting. That's my motion.
Second.
Any discussion by commission?
I would like to suggest that rather than deferring entirely, that staff has already given us a recommendation with a list of modifications that would be made. If we make a motion that requires that those be included in order to approve the design, and the applicant and his client agree with those, then it would not necessarily come back to us. However, based on your motion, my understanding is no matter what, it has to come back to us. I would prefer to make a motion that moves the ball forward with the opportunity for the applicant to come back with a modification to the design.
But in that regard, we've asked the applicant if he was willing to work with the staff, one being removing the porch or the element on the porch, and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. So if that's one of the issues, it was asked and answered that he's not willing to do that. So, and we don't want the staff to have to redesign the building.
I agree. However, staff's already made recommendations and has recommended approval based on those recommendations.
You're talking about everything but the porch.
So I would agree with John's comments, because I think that there could be other creative ways that the applicant could go back to his client and look at expanding the footprint, determining whether or not he actually has maxed it out, whatever it may be. At least that is some open-ended option as opposed to just having to come back.
And in terms of just timeline, if we approve the bulk of the footprint of the building, he can proceed with construction knowing that he's got something approved, even if it's not what's desirable.
Well, I don't believe that unless he has an approval for design, that he would have any opportunity to proceed with construction.
And my point is that the staff's recommendation is to grant a certificate of design approval based on a list of of modifications that would be necessary to the design as presented.
I fully appreciate what you're saying. I think what my proposal is, and the motion I've made, is staff has indicated that they would prefer a decision to be rendered or provided by the commission and it not be deferred back to them, having had a lengthy opportunity to work with the client. So that what I'm offering here is an opportunity for us, again, as the conflicted statements from commissioners, not taking anyone in particular here, but so that a full understanding of the PUD allows us to come back with the client next at another meeting. If there is therefore a decision by the client and owner to go forward with any of the suggested changes, that we therefore would have a better opportunity to render a motion and a decision.
Already complied to all except for the front porch. I said I was willing to do so. I'm also willing to, I would ask that someone offer something that today, if possible, that we can agree on and say, okay, this modification can be done, and upon this modification, a CDA, or Certificate of Design Approval, will be granted, that we could move forward. If we could come to that, that would be great. The main thing is just the front office and what would like to be seen or done with it. We're willing to work with it. We're just not really getting the ability to do so. It's kind of being put backwards and saying, okay, well, we're just not going to deal with it today, rather than, I would appreciate an option.
Then here's what I will do. If it appears you're willing to make a motion, anyone here on the commission, I will withdraw my motion and allow for a second motion to be offered.
Okay. In that case, I will attempt a motion. In keeping with the recommendation of staff, and as based on the presentation and the discussions made, and based on the applicant's willingness to comply or make revisions based on the staff recommendations to us, it is my motion that this board grant a certificate of design approval for the construction of the two-story single-family residence at 2307 Wayne Street, with the following requirements, most of which the applicant has already agreed to conform with. That the porch shall be open the full width of the facade with no enclosure. A window will be added to the first floor on the right side close to the facade. The second floor window on the right side closest to the facade shall be enlarged to a full-size window. Windows shall be wood or aluminum clad with exterior muntins. Window configuration will be modified to be consistent with neighborhood standards. All other details deferred to staff.
May I interject for just a moment and ask a question? Okay.
I second.
We have a motion and a second? Yes, Ms. Great has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion?
Just to clarify, the porch shall be open the full width of the facade was part of your motion.
That was the very first statement, yes.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion to approve with recommendations, or conditions rather, and we have a second by Ms. Great. Any further discussion by commission? That being the case, would you call the roll for a vote, please?
Mr. Bognight? Yes. Ms. Great?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Herger?
Yes.
Mr. Heiler? Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Wynn?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may also.
Yes.
That motion was made with the understanding that the applicant has the opportunity to come back and present a new design next time if that's his decision.
Yes.
Okay.
We have the next and last case for this meeting at 801 Florence Street.
This is a contributing property in the Earlwood Protection Area, which is coming before you for a Bailey bill. The applicant unfortunately could not be here today. And the only reason it's not on consent is because there are a couple outstanding issues on the rear of the house that we were told about a little late, so we just want to make sure that the commission is comfortable with those, with the Bailey bill. But overall, the project largely complies. This is a small craftsman house located on a corner lot, so all the elevations are visible. On the rear, they did obtain, a previous owner obtained a permit to remove the openings in the left bay and convert the double window in the right bay to a single door. Part of that work has already been completed, and much of it has already been started. So those were some issues, as well as some comment about maybe a window on the right side as you look at the house being removed. But the motion that I would, or the recommendations from staff would hopefully give staff a little more room to work with them on those details. So we find that the project generally complies with section 17-698 of city ordinance and recommend preliminary certification for the Bailey bill, with the conditions that it meets the 20% investment, it meets the work outlined in the ordinance, the removal of the door and window openings in the rear will be worked out with staff. I'm paraphrasing here, and that the request to remove a window opening on the right side will be reviewed by staff. The new door opening conversion from a window on the rear will be worked out with staff, and all details deferred to staff. And then a second recommendation would be for a certificate of design approval for the same project based on the same conditions listed above for the Bailey bill. Do you have any questions for me? We would
Yes.
request two
Bailey
motions.
bill and design approval.
Which comes first?
The Bailey bill.
Bailey bill.
I'll make the motion that we grant approval for the preliminary certification of the Bailey bill for 801 Florence Street based on the staff's recommendations.
Second.
Very good. We have a motion to approve for the Bailey bill and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, I'm about to. Is there anyone here who has any desire to approve or to support or oppose this opportunity or this application? No. That being the case, again, we have a motion for the Bailey bill and a second. No further discussion. Call the roll for a vote, please.
Mr. Bachnight? Yes. Ms. Grate?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Herger?
Yes.
Mr. Heiler? Mr. Cohn? Yes. Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Thank you. We have approval.
Approval for the Bailey bill. That takes us to a design approval, or application for design approval here at 801 Florence Street. We've had the presentation by Ms. Ritchie. Are there any questions? Again, there's no one here for opposition or support. That being the case, we'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that this board grant a certificate of design approval for 801 Florence Street with all details deferred to staff.
Thank you very much, sir. I will second that motion. Any discussion? There being none, we'll call the roll again for this last vote.
Mr. Bachnight? Yes. Ms. Grate?
Yes.
Mr. Gressett?
Yes.
Mr. Herger?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn? Yes. Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes?
We have approval.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. At this time, that concludes our regular agenda. Is there any other business that,
Just the July minutes, please.
okay. So we're going to ask for an approval or a motion to approve the July minutes.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Great to approve the minutes from July.
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? There being none, we'll go ahead and ask for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The approval of minutes has passed.
Thank you.
Is there a motion for adjournment? We've got a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.